Uh,
All right. I am now going live on Instagram, YouTube, and on our and accommodate more affordable housing. These efforts have been unsuccessful due to political objection, stagnation, and bureaucracy. All right. um, Going live on YouTube, our Facebook RealtyHack group, and on Instagram. So what I wanted to talk about today is the NAR settlement and kind of give my thoughts. I gave some preliminary thoughts over the weekend, but I've compiled a lot of information here. So here's what we know currently. First, let's address the misinformation. You know, CNN and other major news outlets have done a horrible job of addressing what has happened. You know, one of the headlines was realtors agree to Act's 6% commission. Um, I don't think that there's anything in the settlement that talks about any percentage, the 6% commission that we were supposed to be charging. I never got that memo. I know that the average commission nationwide historically over the last couple of years has been around 5%. And I know lots of parts of the country where they are 2 and 2.5%. They also say that buyers will not be, well, this is maybe not in the news, but I've heard a lot of people talk about that buyers will not be paid by sellers. That is not true. That is, from everything that I have looked at, that is not what is happening. We are not, sellers are still able to offer buyer compensation, right? I want to talk about what happened, well, you know, some major points on the lawsuit. Here's what's been agreed to. Buyer compensation will no longer be posted on MLS as an agreement to cooperate. Now, there may be a field that shows what a seller is willing to pay. We're not sure about that. It's still early on. And just so you know, this is not a done deal specifically yet. It still has to be ratified by a judge, and the DOJ is going to comment on it and, you know, give their blessing or maybe ask for other things that are already that weren't already agreed to. But buyer's agents will be required to have a buyer agreement to show a property, and that's a good thing. We've encouraged this for years, and we implemented a policy for our agents to make it mandatory just earlier this year. But here's the big one that I don't think a lot of people realize has happened. Brokerages with 2022 total transaction volume over 2 billion can be included in the definition of released party, but only if the brokerage has a realtor principal with membership in the National Association of Realtors, has a principal who has participated in any MLS, including a member that operates in an unincorporated multiple listing service at any time during the time period, complies with the practice changes reflected in paragraph 58 of the settlement agreement, and provides proof of such compliance, and agrees to be bound by the procedure and requirements reflected in Section B of Appendix C, including by making payments pursuant to those paragraphs. That's the big one, guys. Here's what Appendix C states. Within 120 days following preliminary approval of the settlement agreement, the stipulating party will deposit into an escrow account an amount equal to 0.00025 multiplied by its total transaction volume over the most recent 4 calendar years, the total monetary amount. So to give you an example of what that would look like, and now these are only companies that during that time period had a transaction dollar amount over $2 billion. So, you know, as a kind of a point of reference, $2 billion will volume would result in a $5 million payment. Okay. According to Rob Hahn of the Notorious Rob publication, there are 173 brokerages that have 2 billion or more in sales volume. He notes that Compass will be looking at 570 million, Douglas Elliman would be 107 million, and Et Properties will be 74 million. Guys, those are staggering numbers. Can you imagine what those will do to these brokerages? Brokerages under the 2 billion transaction number will get off scot-free, apparently, and with good reason, because, you know, like our sales volume over the last 2 years was just right at 400 million. Like if I looked at that, what the 0.0025, it'd be something like $400,000 check. I mean, that would cripple a small brokerage, and it may. I suspect that some at least one, maybe more of these bigger brokerages may end up falling on this, because now they have to agree to that. And if they agree to that, then they're covered under the agreement. If they don't agree to it, then they are subject to further litigation, which is a big deal, right? I think that you will see some major cutbacks at a lot of these companies if they decide to proceed with the agreement that NAR has outlined. Here are the points for what you're going to need to know based on the information that I've looked at and my interpretation of it. Buyer representation is going to be required even for a single property. We will likely make a single property buyer representation, meaning if you meet a client that comes from, online and they want to see a property, you'll have to have them sign that buyer rep agreement before they go into property. That might sound like a bad thing, but how many times have you guys gone to a property and had someone say, "Oh, I have an agent"? Well, that's the reverse of this. That's the pro in that you're going to say, "I'm sorry, but your agent's not here, and if you have a buyer rep agreement with them, I cannot help you, and I cannot show this without you signing at least a single property agreement. If not, a multi-property full representation," right? Here's another big one. If you have a buyer rep agreement for 1% and the seller is paying 2.5%, and you will walk away with 1%, you are bound to the agreement that you have with the buyer rep agreement. Now, you can lower your commission during the transaction for concessions, but you can't get more than what was previously agreed to, okay? Buyer representation for one property will need to be made and signed for a single showing. As I said, this does impact the rental market. One thing that is unknown is how agents will know what a seller is willing to pay. I suspect it will be through a document in MLS. Now, what you have to understand is maybe it is a field. Maybe it says, here's what they're offering to pay. But right now, before pre-Friday, that agreement was a binding agreement. That was a cooperation of, if it's in MLS, then they're bound to that. That can obviously be negotiated. But I guess what I'm saying is, if pre-Friday, if a listing agent had 3% in there and you showed up at the closing and they said, "Oh, you know what? We're only paying 1%." Well, no, you put in the MLS 3%, and that's what's agreed to. Okay. So, the bottom line is you're going to start to need to treat your buyers in the same care and demonstration of value that you would a seller. Make sure that they know what you do for them. Why would a buyer use an agent now? Well, the same reason as before, okay? You have to explain to people that the average homeowner moves 3 times during their life in a primary residence. It is a huge undertaking for most families. It's the single biggest investment that they'll ever make. And there's a lot of room for error if you do not have a real estate agent, okay? Also, if someone is not using a qualified, professional, experienced agent that knows what they're doing, they open themselves up to a lot of litigation. I think that the statistic for sale by owners is 3 to 4 times more likely to end up in litigation than a home that is listed and sold with an agent. So you can say the same thing with a buyer, right? Talking to sellers, if they are wanting, here's another thing. You're going to have to really explain to the seller why they're going to want to offer compensation, right? Because let's say your seller wants to pay 1%, and a buyer's agent has an agreement for 2.5%. Well, we know that fiduciary duty for a buyer's agent is not going to eliminate that property from being shown. But a good agent is going to say, "Hey, I want to show you this property. Just so you know, they're only paying 1%. So what that means to you is that this property will cost an additional 1.5%, right? That is a huge talking point. Another talking point is that I suspect that when it comes down to appraisers using comps, if you've got a neighborhood where, the majority of the comps are paying 2.5%, then um, and your listing that you have is paying 1% to a buyer's agent, that an appraiser may make a adjustment of a 1.5%. Now, how would they know? Well, I suspect that these agreements of what a listing agent is going to compensate a buyer's agent, or a seller is going to compensate a buyer's agent, will be listed as an attachment MLS. I don't know this, but that's what I suspect. So I want to open this up. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to look at YouTube right now and see if we have anything here. Let's go. Can you look on there and see? Just maybe your phone. We had a lengthy discussion with our agents just recently, and there was a lot of good questions on there. I think for our part of it is the main thing that I would stress is that you're just not going to have a whole lot different. Okay. Our commission is going to be compressed. Yes, they've already been compressed. I mean, if you look at what people are paying over the past several years, I know that they've gone down. You've got, you're getting compressed by companies that are charging referral fees. The main thing is that you're going to see, let me see, here we go. Let's see. Will it be determined March 28th as to how the broker compensation will be displayed? No, I think that all these rules will come into effect in July. So you have to realize that this news is less than 80 hours old, right? And I think that what we're going to see is we have to have it ratified. The DOJ has to comment on it, and then your association, Austin Board of Realtors, or whatever association that you belong to, it's going to guide us through this. They've done a good job in the past, and I think that right now is a good time to really pay attention to your emails from your broker, from your association. I know that we're going to stay on top of this, and I will promise that I will put this information out to you. One other thing that I think is really important. Over the last, over this, part of the news is this will cover the seller lawsuits for all the three major class action lawsuits and the copycats, as I understand it. Okay. So one thing about it, it will be over with. Now there are, I believe, some buyer lawsuits, but I don't think that they have as much substance as these seller ones. So, and again, if you're with a large brokerage, you're going to want to know what their plan is going to be. And also, as I understand it, if you're a brokerage that's under $2 billion in sales and for 2022, then you are automatically included in the settlement without having to make monetary compensation. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it, guys. This is going to be short and sweet. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to me. My email is ryan@spyglassrealty.com. 512-883-4074 is my cell phone number. I want to keep you guys up to date. Please comment in the section below if you have any other questions that you want us to address. We will be reporting on this very frequently. And I think, look, here's the bottom line, guys. This is not the end of the world. You need to make sure that your people know that the news has reported with the worst journalistic integrity that I can possibly see. Okay. These lawsuits have slandered us. And I think it's a really sad day when you have an industry such as the law industry, which puts publicly on their website that litigation expenses should be between 35 and 40%. And we're accused of colluding. I mean, what the hell, right? So anyway, all right. Thanks a lot, guys.